You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Time to sharpen those swords. You're listening to Sabres Semantics, a hard-hitting interview and discussion show featuring players, alumni, media, and all others who have or still cover the NHL's Buffalo Sabres. With interesting stories from the past and current objective analysis, this show is sure to provide an entertaining and unique perspective for both Sabres and hockey fans alike.
Oh, brother, we are not worthy!
Exclusively on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Now, here's your host of Sabres Semantics, Brandon Caputo.
Welcome into a special episode of Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Thank you to those that are tuned in on our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell to stay up to date with all of our coverage going into next season, as well as those listening on your favorite on-demand audio platform. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broder with you in our offseason to quickly go over upcoming NHL Entry Draft with the Sabres with the 9th overall pick, what they might do with that pick, some free agent predictions going into next week's offseason, as well as reactions to the Kevyn Adams press conference with some, I guess, interesting quotes that we'll discuss quickly on today's show. Again, this is a quick impromptu episode in our offseason, but Austin and I wanted to come on here and give you guys a quick episode leading up to the draft, and obviously this being an exciting time, and everybody has an opinion on at this time of year about what the team should do, what they might do, and with the draft coming on Friday, the first round, and on Saturday, rounds 2 to 7, going to be interesting. There's some trade rumors that have been going around with the Sabres as well. Some of their players being told that they're one of the more active teams in the trade market. We'll see if that ends up coming to fruition, but definitely a lot to discuss on today's show. With that said, Austin, before we get going with sort of the Adams presser, because I know you've got a lot to, unwind with that. A couple of big pieces of news that did happen since our last episode. The first one was Jarmo Kekkalainen being hired as senior advisor for the team to help out Kevyn Adams. He talked about him a little bit in his presser. He did say that he's going to be based out of Columbus, so he's going to be able to get a look from the pro scouting side in Columbus and be available to Kevyn Adams. He wants to be boots on the ground and help him out in that sense. Longtime Columbus Blue Jackets general manager Jarmo Kekkalainen. That was sort of a name that you had talked about that you had wanted them to bring in if a guy like Brendan Shanahan wasn't available. Your thoughts on that and how you think he's going to be able to help the franchise going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a guy that made a lot of sense, right? He kind of checked off all their criteria, being former GM. He's been a GM for a while. He had success with Columbus, and he's didn't get a GM job. So, it made sense. It's the based out of Columbus thing doesn't really bother me. I mean, as far as we know, he's a guy who wants to be a GM again. So this is likely a one-year job, or he becomes a GM of Buffalo. And then when he's a GM of Buffalo, he'll obviously move to Buffalo. So that part didn't bother me, but it's a voice in the room that Adams needs. Remains to be seen how much influence and power he actually has. It's kind of why I'm intrigued over the next week, kind of see what they make, to see if anything does have any Kekkalainen influence under it, whether that's a guy with ties to Columbus, whether that we know Kekkalainen was aggressive with trades like Seth Jones, the Panarin trade, things like that. So I'm kind of just interested to see some kind of inkling of how much power this guy will have, because I do think he's a guy that can be leaned on, and say what you want about his end in Columbus, it wasn't great, but he had success there. So good guy, good move. Out of all the names that were kind of thrown around, he was obviously on the list that we talked about. So I don't really have any. There's not a downside to it.
Yeah, the Sabres actually got a lot of positive PR for once for that
Yeah.
hire, so that's very rare for them as of late, but a guy that's well respected, and we'll see what his sort of role is going forward with Kevyn Adams, like you mentioned. If things go south again for Adams, maybe he steps into the GM chair once again, but bringing in Jarmo Kekkalainen as the senior advisor, as well as a long time coming for Sabres legend Alexander Mogilny, 76 goals as a rookie, over 1,000 career points, spent 6 seasons with the Buffalo Sabres, 6 best seasons in my opinion of his career, before going on to play for the Vancouver Canucks, New Jersey Devils, and the Toronto Maple Leafs that we try to forget about on this side of the show. But Austin, we've been talking about Mogilny trying to get in for the better part of a decade now. Wondered what the heck was going on. Considered his historic career and a trailblazer for, defecting Russian players being able to come to North America. He was really the first one that paved the way for all the other great, Russian players and people from that area that were able to come over and have great careers in the National Hockey League. Look what Alex Ovechkin's doing right now. You look at Sergei Fedorov, Pavel Bure, all those guys, were after Alexander Mogilny. And just it's such an amazing and fun player to watch, especially for in that 90s brand of hockey. Still played, an up-tempo game and one of the, flashiest players you'd see in that time. So number 89 has already been inducted into the Sabres Hall of Fame, but getting the nod to the Hockey Hall of Fame, I know means a lot to both of us and to not only Sabres fans, but hockey fans in general.
Yeah, I mean, playing career aside, obviously, fantastic playing career, over 1,000 points in under 1,000 games. Like you said, 76 goals he scored, with the Sabres in 77 games that one year. But just you said it, the trailblazer, the fact that he was able to set a precedent for Russian players to come to the NHL, being the first one, dude deserved a spot in the Hall of Fame. Last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that, it kind of didn't really make sense that he was somehow passed over. But he finally got in, well deserved, and it's a guy that, like you said, Sabre ties there, good for Buffalo on doing what they did back then, helping him get over here, and just a guy that beyond deserves it. It's been a long time coming, and it feels like this conversation should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah, only 6 years in Buffalo, but if it was 6 impactful years, and you see what him and Pat LaFontaine were able to do together, and I know his number is probably never going to be retired in the rafters, but I would love to see it. My favorite player of all time, skater, along with Dominic Hasek, so it was really exciting for me to see, Mogilny get inducted into the Sabres Hall of Fame, but then you're wondering if he was ever going to get that call to the Hockey Hall of Fame, being back in Russia now, and we know, the political games and, the landscape of what's going on there, just in a world stage, so in a world landscape. So for him to be able to get the nod despite all that, it was a lot of questions as to why he didn't, and then it was sort of a shock to everybody that they just assumed he would be a snub once again, but he gets the call there, along with another great player in Joe Thornton, Duncan Keith, Zdeno Chara, some great players, and it makes us feel old, Austin, because we grew up watching these guys, and now they're getting inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I don't know if you had any quick thoughts on the rest of the class.
Yeah, no, I mean, class, everyone was pretty much worthy. It's just, I don't know if it makes you feel old, but it also just feels like you don't have to. It makes it even more insane why Mogilny took so long that he did, because the fact that Chara, Keith, and Thornton were already eligible for the Hall of Fame, they didn't retire that long ago. So it makes it even crazier how Mogilny took so long. But yeah, I don't think I saw some people say like even Carey Price was eligible. He was passed over for the first time, and even that I was like, how the heck is Carey Price already eligible for the Hall of Fame? But that's a different conversation. And obviously, Carey Price will get in. He's not going to have to wait very long. So no one on the Canadians fans or Hockey Canada fans, they don't have to worry about that. But Mogilny was worthy. He's been worthy for a long time. Yeah, guys that we kind of saw their whole career already going into the Hall of Fame, like a Duncan Keith, like a Zdeno Chara, like a Joe Thornton. It is weird. It is odd. It does make me feel a little bit old, but I mean, feels like yesterday they were playing. I guess that's my point. It just seems like it's crazy that these guys are already in the Hall of Fame, but whatever.
I've been playing fantasy hockey long enough that those guys were top end players. Back when I was still drafting fantasy hockey. Joe Thornton, my favorite Shark of all time. The reason that I do like the Sharks as well. Mogilny finally getting in, just, don't have enough words, and we could go on for hours about, his impact on Buffalo, the game of hockey, and a lot of us growing up. So very well deserved to number 89, Alexander Mogilny, and I believe he is going in as a Buffalo Sabre. At least they put his Sabres picture up there, so I would assume that he is going in as a Sabre. So that makes it even more sweet, given how much he meant to the organization at that time. So with that, we'll move on to the Kevyn Adams presser. We go from the highs of Alexander Mogilny to the lows of Kevyn Adams, this pre-draft press conference, and Austin, did we get one or two quotes that I'm definitely looking forward to hearing your reaction, and I'm sure the listeners, want to hear your reactions to it, as somebody that has been very critical of Kevyn Adams over the last little bit on this show. We'll start off with our Twitter poll. Make sure to give us a follow on X at Sabres Semantics to get in on our Twitter polls. Again, we're in the offseason, but when we do get this show started up again full-time in September, we've got a lot of big plans for it. We'll be posting all of our polls on there for you guys to get involved. For you guys listening in audio, it is thoughts on the Sabres GM. Thoughts on Sabres general manager Kevyn Adams' pre-draft press conference. Informative, some substance, no substance, or train wreck. And to no surprise today, given the Sabres fans' reaction, train wreck won with 55.3%. No substance was second at 36.8%. And some substance, there were a few of them out there, 7.9%. And a crickets for the informative at 0%. Austin, we had talked about this right when the presser happened. You had an instant reaction to it. You've had a little bit of time to settle down now and maybe re-listen to a few of the quotes and a few of the things that Kevyn Adams and Jerry Fortin had to say leading up to the draft on Friday. Initial reactions to it now.
Yeah, like I said, we were saying off camera, before we started recording. In a vacuum, I don't think there was necessarily anything blatantly bad, right? We can get into the way he handled the Peterka question and the way he just randomly brought up buying out Mattias Samuelsson. That was one rumor that was, and he just for some reason decided to single that one out. Whatever, it's the off-season rumors happen. But like I said, in a vacuum, nothing overly bad. But Kevyn Adams does not get to operate in a vacuum. He has to operate in the fact that he's now, almost half of this drought is on him now. He's been here a long time, gotten progressively worse over the last handful of years, and still has the job, and just sits there. And again, I'm not asking. I don't think fans are asking for you to tell us which players you're trading, which players you're targeting in free agency and all that stuff. But the tone of his media availabilities lately are just bleak, right? You can start with, I'll give him credit, the after trade deadline one I didn't hate. I thought he was reflective and had some substance there. But then it's just the end of season one, what area of your job can you get better? And his response was just everything. It's oh, okay, cool. That's good. Even today, it's just you talk about all this misinformation and how you feel bad for fans. First of all, you should feel bad for fans that you haven't put a watchable product on the ice, but that's beside the point. But you feel bad for fans that there's all this misinformation, and then you single out the Samuelsson stuff. But then when you're asked blatantly about Peterka, a guy you traded up for, drafted and developed, and deserve some credit for because you traded up, drafted, and developed that kid. He's apparently the hottest, one of the hot, Frank Saravalli, I swear to God, is on Alan Walsh's payroll the way he's shilling for a Peterka trade this offseason. But beside the point, his name is out there. You talk about all the misinformation, but you provide no clarity on that situation whatsoever. Okay, that's a little bit odd. That's a player that fans would like some clarity on. You were able to provide clarity on Samuelsson. You were able to provide clarity on Tuck. You talked about how Tuck knows he's a priority for you. By not providing clarity on Peterka, it kind of plays into maybe he is available. Which, if he's available, that's totally cool. You have trade chips, use them, make sure they're good deals. But if he's a trade chip that's garnering interest, use him. But there's no clarity there. The Samuelsson stuff is just weird. There was no conversations about buying out a defenseman who has been called out by his teammates for not stepping up in the Tage Thompson situation. There's been no talks about buying out a player who just is the first long-term contract you gave out for. And it was a good gamble at the time, I thought, but it just clearly hasn't worked out.
Here's the quote. I feel bad for our fans. There's so much misinformation, it's nonsense. Someone that has no idea what they're talking about reporting that we're going to buy out Sammy. We've never had that conversation once.
Yeah, and I'll give Adams credit here. all he did was mention the buyout, so not necessarily saying, hey, we're not planning on trade. Like, he never denied that they might trade him, which is cool. If someone's going to trade for Samuelsson, that's awesome. But it's just like, why that player? Why that rumor specifically did you bring up? I don't blame people for being like, oh my God, clearly that means Samuelson's staying. Like, it is what it is. They could end up trading him and it means nothing, but it was just weird that was a situation he singled out. And then there's just, like I said, in a vacuum, not that bad of a press availability. But like when you're Kevyn Adams and you've tanked your goodwill with this fan base as much as you have over the last 3 years, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. And the whole theme over the last 4 or 5 years, and nothing against Oposo, but even guys like Oposo said we don't own this whole drought. Unfortunately, you can't do that as Kevyn Adams because you are the general manager and you've been here for 6 years. So yeah, you don't own the 14-year drought, but you own almost 50% of it. Is it too much to ask to hear your GM say we're going to be aggressive and do everything in our power to make sure we make the playoffs next year? Because Verbeek did that in Anaheim. And all for naught, his actions have kind of backed it up. He hired, whatever your opinion on Joel Quenneville is, I don't necessarily think he should be a coach, but they went out and spent on a good head coach. They didn't go get, nothing against Lindy Ruff, they didn't go get a coach who was just fired and you didn't have to pay a lot of money to. He traded Trevor Zegras, albeit not for a lot, but made a core trade there. There's still time for Adams to do all this, but it's just like you don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. Now, again, you could make 2 trades by the draft and, this is all for nothing. But unfortunately for Kevyn Adams, you don't get to operate as if the fan base trusts you because they don't. And there's a reason that they don't.
And I mean, how many years have we come on here and talked about, as this drought has gone on with Kevyn Adams at the helm, about the transparency, right? And I think that's something that you're talking about is that he gets transparent about the things like Alex Tuck, but then when talking about like the JJ Peterka situation, he just said, there's positive talks at the end of the season, and just says like he'd rather not comment on it in fairness to the player and, doesn't want to talk about it until they go into the offseason or go past the draft.
That to me signals he doesn't know what he's doing with JJ Peterka yet, which is
right.
Fine. If you're thinking about trading him, that's cool. You don't have to say I'm thinking about trading him, but like you don't get to say there's a lot of misinformation and then be vague about a player when you're specifically asked about it. But then also go to bat for a guy like Samuelsson who wasn't even brought up. It was a weird vibe. That's all.
Especially when top insiders, and I mean, say what you want about insiders, but where there's smoke, there's fire sometimes. And when you have guys like Elliot Friedman saying like they're listening to calls on JJ Peterka, and we've been hearing this from multiple insiders for multiple weeks now. Not necessarily that he's requested a trade.
To the trade deadline.
Yeah,
back to the trade deadline. Saravalli was pushing it the night before the deadline, which again, I don't whatever, but like this did start back in March.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that that stuff at the trade deadline was concerning as far as if Peterka really wanted to be here long term or not.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting because he had, 27 goals, 68 points. He's a guy that you would assume that they want to keep around, as you mentioned, developed, drafted, and a guy that they like a lot. But if the right trade package is out there, and we've heard that Buffalo and Kevyn Adams are one of the more active teams within the trade market and being aggressive and looking at, we even heard today that they've talked about moving up, they've talked about moving down, they've talked about trading it for impact players when they were asked about it in the press conference today. Adams just said we're leaving everything on the table. Well, it's like, well, the draft's coming up on Friday and then, free agent frenzy starts next Tuesday. We're really going to see what their sort of beginning of that plan is, whether they keep the 9th pick, whether they trade it, they trade up, who knows, but to me, I think Kevyn Adams, and he hasn't really said or shown any sort of urgency that this is his final chance or he may be let go, given that it's the last year of his contract. Jarmo Kekkalainen's now in the building. So, like, where do you stand as far as if they are to make a significant trade like that for Peterka or a Bowen Byram is the other name as well? Is this sort of Adams' last hope that they can get this thing on the rails, or he knows that next offseason he won't be having a chance at this?
It should be his last kick at the can. I mean, last year should have been his last kick at the can, but that's beside the point. And it's just, I don't listen to WGR very often, but I saw a clip from Shope, and I don't normally always agree with Mike Shope. That's the beauty of these guys. But Shope, I think, said it perfectly. It was just like Kevyn Adams. You don't get to frame it like the misinformation and things like that. You don't get to frame it that like the media and the insiders are the villains here. There's a reason your good players are said to be unhappy, and you're part of that reason why they're unhappy. You have not built a team to make the playoffs. We gave them credit for waiting and seeing 2 years ago when they probably should have been more active after missing the playoffs by one point. He literally did nothing but sign Clifton and Johnson. Clearly was not good enough. And then,
revamping the bottom six this past offseason, which we thought was going to help, but
work, and it did not.
Other than McLeod.
Yeah. And Shope said it perfectly. Be all in. Tell everyone in your organization you are all in. If you go down with the ship after being super aggressive, who cares? It's your last year on the job according to your contract anyway. Why are you not going guns a-blazing trying to make this team a playoff team? Again, he still could. He still very well could. But giving off the vibe and the message, sending that message to your fan base via a press conference is a good thing. It would get people back on your side in some level. Again, you could say it all you want. You have to go out and do it still. But just by saying that with your chest, people would be like, okay, let's see what you're going to do. But when you sit there and just go like, we have a plan, we're going to execute it, and the way he said it, like it's not confident, and it doesn't instill confidence in your fan base. Again, you could still go out and execute, and we look dumb. That's cool, whatever. But like, it's not like maybe I am wrong. Maybe it's just rose-colored glasses from 2 years ago when they were 1 point out of the playoffs. But like, he used to seem to handle the media well. The press conference used to be something that like I thought he was good at. And now it's just like, again, I'm not asking you to give away your entire offseason plan. That'd be stupid. But like,
to just deflect questions.
Deflect questions. He's monotone. He doesn't even seem like he has any life as the GM of the Buffalo Sabres, which is just, that's what you want to hear. You know what I mean? Like, say what you want about the Bills, whether you agree with it or not. Brandon Beane went on WGR and blasted Jeremy and Joe. That's fire. That's passion. That's a GM who's, all GMs pay attention to the media, but that's the GM of the good team can blast the media. It's not necessarily right, but like he can get away with that. The GM of the crappy team in Buffalo trying to say that the media has a ton of misinformation out there and he feels bad for the fans. Get out of here. You don't get to play that stuff. You guys, like, again, whatever. I call Kevyn Adams. I call him a doofus. He looks like a doofus up there sometimes when he talks, and today was one of those things. It's just like, my God, it's a layup. You want a layup? Tell your fans you're going to be aggressive and go all in to make this team better. I am going back to the trade deadline when Dahlin supposedly had a meeting with him. I'm terrified of what he told Rasmus Dahlin because right now doesn't seem like whatever he told Dahlin either was a lie or Dahlin was okay with, hey, our offseason plan is we're going to make one trade and, oh, yeah, Josh Norris is our big addition. Nothing against Josh Norris, but, like, you can't play that, oh, we got Josh Norris at the trade deadline, only had him for 3 games, he's our big addition. No, that's not – your fan base is not stupid, and you can't treat them like they're stupid. That's why people have turned on them so much is this organization treats fans like they're dumb when they're not.
14-year playoff drought doesn't help either.
No, of course not. It's just like – man, like I said, today it wasn't that bad in a vacuum, but you don't get to operate in a vacuum when you're here for 6 years of the playoff drought.
Did you...
and you're on your third head coach.
Right. And you talked about this guy being the guy, when Lindy.
Like,
and again, he talked about the hires and talked about the coaching staff's all back under contract, but if Lindy wants to bring in somebody, they're going to talk about it, and the
coaching staff was the most irking thing for me because, one, you had no reason to praise your coaching staff. Your coaching staff was bad last year. You were terrible in not Lindy isolated. You were bad on special teams. You were bad defensively. And sorry, this strength and conditioning guy that they hired has gotten rave reviews on everyone from the hockey community, and that's great, fantastic. When you're a joke of an organization who has a terrible reputation, you don't get to hang your hat on, we hired a good strength and conditioning coach. That makes you look dumb. The good teams get to do that because then it matters. The bad teams don't get to be like, yeah, the strength and conditioning coach is going to fix everything. So what, you're just admitting that your players don't show up and don't train? Which is clearly not true, but like, it's just dumb little things like that. It's like, you can't hang your hat on hiring a good strength and conditioning coach, even if he is really good, because he probably is. He got rave reviews of everyone in the hockey community. People were surprised that he came to Buffalo, which again shows your reputation in the hockey world. It's just like, and Lindy has the power to evaluate the coaching staff, is what Adam said. Oh, congratulations! Your head coach has the ability to do his job. Which also, does he really? Because I'm pretty sure Lindy would have at least liked to bring in someone that he has a working relationship with, because he didn't get to bring in any of these guys.
Or when you went through a massive losing streak and you didn't even waive a player.
Yeah. It's just like, I got into it today. Someone's like, well, what self-respecting assistant coach is going to take a job for 1 year, blah, blah, blah. All of them. Anyone who wants to be an assistant coach in the NHL will take a 1-year assistant coaching job because they'll get a job somewhere else next year. That's how it works in the NHL.
That's a resume builder.
And the Nashville just hired Luke Richardson today as an assistant head coach. There's a self-respecting assistant coach. Tell me he's not an upgrade over Seth Appert or Marty Wilford.
Quickly on that Dahlin point, after that meeting that they had about needing to be competitive, or he's going to want to, be shown the door like so many others. Sam Reinhart, 2 back-to-back Stanley Cup champion, Jack Eichel, Ryan O'Reilly, just to name a few. But did you take anything away from that Tage Thompson clip from his? I think he was on Cam Jansen's podcast a few weeks back.
Cam and Strick.
Right, yeah. And he had talked about, the lack of response when he had gotten blasted on the ice, and talked
Mattias
about...
Samuelsson. To me, that was, again, we went over this in detail when it happened.
Yeah.
That's another indictment on Mattias Samuelsson, because, again, you can say what you want about Owen Power and Yuri Kulik. I would have loved to see one of them respond. Cool. It's not really the rookie's job, and no offense to Owen Power. He's never going to do that. He's not. I know people who hate hearing that. I know he's big boy. He's not a physical guy. He just never has been. And that's anyone who thinks he should be. Sorry, you're just never going to like Owen Power. That's never been his game. Samuelsson, that's your calling card. You're supposed to be the big defensive physical guy.
You have an A on your chest.
You have an A on your chest. And to me, whether Tage called it out or not, that was an indictment on Samuelsson. And fans took it that way. We're not dumb. Again, it's just like.
Did you think that was sort of like a shot at the organization to say, like, let's wake up?
Hell yeah, it was. And they need more of that. They need Tage. They need Tuck. Adams talked about Tuck being a priority. If I'm Alex Tuck, I'm using whatever power I have. You want me to stay here? Be a serious organization, and he'll stay here. Which
is crazy because he grew up a Sabres fan, and he loves to be a Sabres fan.
How bad is it going to look when the guy who grew up a Sabres fan says, I don't want to be here anymore?
Who was so excited to put that jersey on after the Jack Eichel trade.
And, like, a player that Kevyn Adams deserves, like, that's your big acquisition is Alex Tuck. You can kind of hang your hat on that. You failed him. You failed Dahlin. You failed Thompson. You failed Owen Power from day one because you have never gotten him a real partner to play with. He finally looked okay with Jacob Bernard-Docker, and that took you, how long did we hear Cousins was getting dealt last year? Started in October. How many times do we hear Kevyn Adams is the most aggressive on the phone lines? We heard that dating back to last free agency. It's just like...
Do you think Byram's been failed as well in his short time here?
Yes and no. Yes and no, because Byram has really only shown an ability to be effective when playing with Rasmus Dahlin. When he's been separated from Dahlin, he's a very good offensive defenseman. But it's also... And look, nothing against Bowen Byram. I don't think he is as good of a two-way player as he needs to be playing with a guy like Power or with Dahlin. Dahlin can carry anybody, but Byram's never going to be a 1 or a 2 guy here because of Power and Dahlin. And hey, all the power to him. If he wants to go do that, he has the right to do that, right? Like, he's got the right to say, I want to go be a number 1 or a number 2 defenseman. I want to play more on the power play. Shouldn't be here because you're not better than Dahlin and you're not better than Power. But also, I mean, you didn't fail Byram, but you put yourself in a spot where you can't sign him, right? I'm sure when Adams traded for Byram, he was hoping that Byram, Dahlin, and Power would be 3 pillars on his back end. And you never, aside from when he was with Dahlin, he never had success. And to me, it's just roster building, and roster building comes down to the GM. It's like I said, today was just another culmination of everything that Adams has done the last 3-4 years that's just not been good. And it's just like, even with the Byram rumors, right? It's like, oh, they want a right shot defenseman for Byram. Okay, good. You've identified you need a right shot defenseman. But why are you so tunnel visioning on we have to get a right shot defenseman for Byram? Go get anything of value for Byram because a lot of teams reportedly want this kid. And go get the best package and go get your right shot defenseman another way. There's more than one way to get a right shot defenseman.
And point of order, he made a note of that in the presser to talk about they've got a really good right defenseman pipeline.
They don't. They don't.
According to him, they do.
Nothing against guys like Maxim Starbak, those they're fine players, but they're not playing in the NHL in the next 2 years. And they're not supposed to be playing in the NHL in the next 2 years. They're prospects who were drafted in the last couple of years. Like, the tunnel vision is how, and I'm okay with Josh Norris. People have a split opinion on him. I know he's not a playmaker. He doesn't get a lot of assists, but he scores goals when he's healthy, and I know he needs to stay healthy. But they tunnel visioned on, we're trading Cousins, we need to get a center back. And that's how they ended up with Josh Norris. We'll see what happens with Norris. There's other ways. Like, you could have traded Cousins for anything and then acquired another center some other way. Same with Byram. You can trade him for anything and acquire a right shot defenseman one way. You just have to be smart. Isn't even the right word. You have to be competent at your job. A smart team would be like, hey, someone's only offering me a first and a prospect for Byram. I'm going to take that and I'm going to flip that for a player. That's what savvy, smart organizations do. Competent organizations say, Byram is a trade piece. I have other needs beside one right shot defenseman. I'm going to trade Byram for anything that fills my need. I'm not going to tunnel vision my negotiations down to I need this. That's what desperate, dumb organizations do. Not even desperate, because I don't think Adams is acting desperate, but he's acting as if there's only one way he can build this team. And even today he said, I believe we have to build through the draft. Buddy, you're not inherently wrong, but you've had 5 drafts. And they're no closer to being good. There's other ways to build a team. I'm not saying go full on Steve Yzerman, but did you know that, again, this isn't inherently a bad thing, it's just an observation. Connor Clifton is the longest contract Kevyn Adams has given out to an unrestricted free agent. 3 years. I'll give him credit. He doesn't overspend in free agency, which is how you get yourself into trouble if you overspend on bad contracts. But, like, Jason Zucker, you were able to extend him for 2 more years, but, like, that 1 year, $5 million contract, you couldn't have, like, found a way to make that 2 or 3 years back then? Instead of coming down to the morning of the trade deadline, hoping you could extend this guy. It's just like things like that. And now you've given Zucker 2 more years, which who knows how he's going to be in 2 years. Guess what? It's not going to matter if your team's not good. If your team's not good this year, Jason Zucker being on this team does nothing for you.
Could probably be a trade piece.
But so it's just like...
And the 7-year extensions that he's been giving out as well to, like, gave with Cousins.
Like I said, if this was year 2 for Kevyn Adams, this press conference probably doesn't bother anybody. But it's not year 2.
Right.
And you still aren't, like, people are worried that Tage and Dahlin are going to want out next year. You have every right to be worried that that's going to happen because so far this team has done nothing to instill any confidence in you.
We're going to take a break. We're going to let Austin regroup here. And we'll be right back on Sabres Semantics as we'll preview the upcoming NHL Draft and the Sabres' 9th overall pick. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Hey, hey, here we go, it's hockey night in Buffalo. Hey, hey, here we go, the boys in blue, white, and gold. Hey, hey, here we go, make some noise, get in the zone. All for one and one for all, let's hear you from your heart and soul. And we will stand raising our hands, saying, let's go Buffalo, let's go Buffalo. We will be here till the end, saying, let's go Buffalo, let's go Buffalo.
And we're back on Sabres Semantics and our special NHL Draft preview, as well as a free agent prediction show and sort of reactions to Kevyn Adams' press conference for the pre-draft with Jerry Fortin on today's show. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broder back with you. Thank you to those that are watching on YouTube. Make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell to stay up to date with all of our video coverage. And those listening on your favorite on-demand audio platform, thank you very much for doing this for a quick off-season episode. Awesome. We talked a lot in the first segment about just, off-season plans for Kevyn Adams, what he's going to need to do, the players, and where the direction of this team is going. We've heard the trade rumors. We talked about it a little bit on the first part of today's show. Peterka and Byram have been talked about maybe as a package for certain trades. We've heard today Frank Saravalli throwing out Noah Dobson for JJ Peterka has been discussed. We heard that trade with Minnesota where it was involving both Byram and Peterka. We heard Vancouver as well. So there's been a lot of teams that have, apparently kicked tires, and Kevyn Adams has been aggressive in that sense. And again, as you've talked about sort of a lot on this show this year about, Adams's rep around the league, if we are to see sort of a big trade coming up now that we sort of transition to the draft part of it, do you anticipate them picking 9th on Friday night?
Picking 9th? I can't. I anticipate them picking in the top 13 of the draft, because what was it last year, the day of the draft, they traded back with San Jose and picked up another pick.
11 to 14.
Yeah.
San Jose drafted Sam Dickinson. They got Costa Hellenis.
And then we shipped that second round pick the next day for Beck Mallenstein or for whatever the other pick was involved in that trade. So I think just given their history, they'll probably pick. Where they pick, I don't know. Maybe they do move back. Thought it was interesting that Fortin was like, to me, this is a 6 or 7 player
yes,
draft.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
I know people got mad at that, but it's just like, yeah, like, he thinks that. That doesn't necessarily mean the player that he would pick at 9 is a bad player, but he thinks like the top 6 or 7 of this class can be very good, and the other ones, like Costa Hellenis had a solid AHL season his first year in pro. So that's that. I maintain that the Sabres have three. They have other trade pieces, but they have 3 really big trade pieces. Number 9, which depends on how big is that? I don't really know. It seems like every team outside the top 5 is interested in moving their pick. Doesn't really help then. But you have number 9, you have Bowen Byram, you have JJ Peterka. 2 of those should be moved. Byram is the slam dunk that should be moved. And then you should probably move 9 or Peterka. I think if you move 2 of those pieces, you can get a couple assets that make your team look really good. And then you go from there. That being said, I've been banging the drum forever to trade the pick. I don't know what the value of number 9 is this year, with so many teams from 5 to 10 being interested in trading their pick, and the draft class around the league has a weaker reputation than most. So don't know what that value is. You're probably better served holding the. I don't know. I don't have an answer, but I would anticipate that they pick. Maybe they move down a couple spots. Maybe they move up a spot, which I think would be dumb because I don't know what that trade looks like. But I would. My gut right now says they're picking, and they're holding the pick.
Jerry Fortin, when asked, as you mentioned, you brought that up, where he said some people say it's a two-person draft. I think it's 6, and then he didn't say that there was only 6 good players in this draft, but he just said the rest after 6 are pretty much comparable. And
you get wide open.
Yeah, you get pretty wide open at that sense. And if they're picking at 9, if they want to get into that top 2 or 3, you'd think it would cost them, either Peterka or a Byram in that sense. But that's even if the team that has that pick is even interested in those types of players. We heard the Jason Robertson pipe dream, but it sounds like Dallas is going to keep him now that they were able to move Marchman out. But you never know what these moves happen on trade or on a draft day, especially with it being centralized or non-centralized. I mean, where everybody's going to be at their home bases. The Sabres are going to be at the Bills drafting facility, down at the stadium. So, Adams talked about them losing sort of that face-to-face interaction that they would get when they're all in the same room at the draft and maybe talk about something, but he didn't say it was significant. But if there were trades to come up, maybe we don't see them as quickly as we might see at the draft if they were in person. They can always text or pick up the phone and call somebody. But
I find that odd because, again, I know it's a different league, but the NFL draft is fine with that. Now, granted, the NFL draft, you're not trading players per chance, but how many times do we see trade ups and trade downs at the NFL draft where that draft's decentralized? I'm hoping the league goes back to the centralized draft. It's one of the things that makes the NHL draft cool. But I don't know. I think that's just a lame excuse for any GM who says, "Oh, we're decentralized, so it makes trades harder." Dude, have a trade deadline where you're at your office and you're decentralized. Like, if you want to make trades, make trades. Like, don't whatever. That being said, they absolutely should go back to the centralized draft. It's cool. Yeah, I also thought it was, again, Fortin said this multiple times, so I thought it was interesting that said, as a scout, I put work in here, but, if we trade number 9, that means we're doing something to help the team right now, and that's more important. So, like, Adams doesn't get credit for saying, I'm so open to trading number 9 because, thanks, dude, you should be. But I guess it's a good thing that he said that. Like, trying not to crap on the dude so much because, like I said, today's press conference wasn't that bad in a vacuum. It's just a lot of resentment the fans and myself have towards him over the last couple of years. But I mean, it should be not a benefit, but like maybe that's why we've seen a little bit more activity leading up to the draft because guys are saying, "Hey, we're not traveling, so I can be a little bit busy prior to the draft." Because again, hey, Kevyn Adams and other NHL GMs, you can make trades now. You could have been making trades the last 3 weeks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like the NHL more than any league has crutches on to why they can't make deals. And you look at all the other leagues, the way players are moving. I know every league is different, but it's just like, come on, man. You want to make a trade, you can figure out a way to get it done. Whether you're centralized, decentralized. If you don't want to trade number 9, don't trade it. But don't pretend like, oh, we might trade it. I know, again, you have to. It's NHL GM speak, but it's just like, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not that hard. Like, tell Fortin, hey, we're not picking number 9, so don't even worry about it. Like, you can do that stuff internally.
They had him show up, so for that press
I
conference.
know, I did. I felt bad for Fortin because, again, nothing against him. It's not a him thing. The way the last 3 years have gone with Adams, nothing against Fortin. We're not here to talk about. I know this was the pre-draft press conference, but like media and fans don't care about the draft, and it's not because whatever. It's because again, how many times have we said we're going to be aggressive and improve the team, and they're just not done it? The draft becomes secondary. You can only take 14 years of caring about the draft before you had enough. And this is a guy who scouted and loves the draft. I'm over it as a Sabres fan, not as a hockey fan.
And he did mention that they're just drafting best player available, and it's not necessarily what the need of the roster is. So
thanks, Tips. No, it's the NHL. That's all. Again, see, I'm getting mad at him for not.
Yeah.
Like he's not saying anything wrong. That's what every GM says, but it's what happens.
Now, barring any trades, because we have heard about maybe Pittsburgh's got the New York Rangers pick now, and they're picking back to back. Maybe they try to package that and move up. But as of now, if the draft were to stay with it, as you guys are following along on video, I've got some stuff up on the screen there as far as just the depth chart for the Sabres, the contracts, going over Bob McKenzie's list for his final draft rankings for this upcoming draft, as well as the North American projected North American skater list that has been released, the last one, as well as the international skaters. Really only Anton Frundell and Victor Eklund are even remotely close to being around where Buffalo's going to be picking, but it seems like it's going to be a North American player, and with us being so close and covering the OHL, there could be up to 5 OHL players that are taken in the top 10, which would be pretty incredible. Austin, there's been a lot of debate on where the Sabres might go with this pick. Bob McKenzie has Roger McQueen as the number 9th player right now. Brady Martin has been skyrocketing up. He's number 8. Victor Eklund, the brother of William Eklund of the San Jose Sharks, is 10. You had talked about Radim Murka on our season finale episode as a guy that you'd be interested in on the defensive side. Keyshawn Aitchison's another name rumored around there, maybe even a Jake O'Brien from Brantford. If James Haggins is to fall there, first off, give me a name or two that you're interested in, and who do you think would be the best fit for the Sabres if they are to keep number 9 and going forward?
Names that I'm personally interested in are, like Radim Murka, O'Brien, Martin, but Martin is not only rising. I think the Sam Bennett discourse is just going to make some team overdraft Brady Martin. Nothing against Brady Martin. He's a phenomenal player.
I've heard upwards of maybe 4th overall for Brady Martin.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's whatever. So those are kind of the names that I like. Names that I think that they might like. Murka is up there, obviously. I think they could easily fall in love with Keyshawn Aitchison. He's that old school physical defenseman who has the offensive upside, but he's the closest thing you can get to an old school defenseman. We heard Fortin, who was asked about him. I didn't hear the question because you can't hear questions when you listen to the press conferences live. They just don't apparently have microphones for the media.
Yeah, he was asked about Aitchison and Murka specifically.
So I could see them falling in love with those two guys. And honestly, the sample size is just too small. So I'm worried about him, but I could see them falling in love with Roger McQueen. 6'5", can score. He's physical. I could see all the teams falling in love with him. I don't know enough about him, but I'm a little bit nervous on the fact that he was just injured and had the sample size there. But
The back injury.
Yeah, the physical attributes and the tools, I could see them falling in love with. So those are probably the guys that they're looking at there. I genuinely don't know. Like,
is there a guy you hope that would fall? Like maybe that's a top 5 that you would like to see.
That I would hope fall.
Yeah, like obviously like Schaefer and Misa probably not, but
the one guy I don't necessarily hope will fall, but I could see falling, Martone or Hagens. I don't know if they fall at 9 though.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I did see one of the Athletic guys was either Pronman or Wheeler, and one of their mocks did have Martone falling to the Sabres, which I thought was interesting. Don't necessarily know how connected they are to that type of stuff, but there seems to be one guy who rises every year. I think it was last year on draft day. That's when Beckett Seneke's name started circling around for Anaheim at 3.
Mm-hmm.
The other day, don't know how accurate it was. Friedman said he heard Frondell as early as 2 to San Jose, which would be interesting because that would kind of throw Misa or Hagen, because we're just assuming Schaefer goes number 1 overall, right?
Right.
So that would kind of Frondell at 2, if true, would be an interesting one. So it'll be interesting. I think it's if there is going to be that late riser. Like I said, I think the Sam Bennett discourse here will have Brady Martin skyrocket up people's boards. Brady Martin's a phenomenal player. Don't necessarily think he's a top 3 pick, but he's a phenomenal player and he plays that way. So I could see some team overdrafting there. Philly gets a little interesting because they just traded for Zegras. Does that mean I don't think that would change their draft philosophy or process? But you never know. Some front offices are dumb and are short-sighted like that. So it'll be interesting. Like, I kind of agree with Fortin where I do think it is Misa and Schaefer, and then a little bit of a gap, and then like a group of like 4 or 5 players, and then another bigger gap. So it will be interesting to see what NHL front offices think that second tier of players are. Like the Brady Martins, the James Hagens, the Porter Martone. Like, how high does Martone go? How low does Martone go? There's a couple interesting things, but I could see Martone. He would be the one I would pick that would fall. And if he's there at 9, I mean, it's kind of hard to pass that up.
There's a lot of talk of Nashville has heavily scouted Martone, and maybe he's an option for them at 5. But again,
would make sense.
They really need a center bad. But if they end up going winger, that would be interesting. If you're the Sabres, and I know we've talked about it, for most of the year, and you can't just necessarily say that person's going to pull a Zach Benson and make the team as an 18-year-old rookie. In your opinion, what is their biggest need as far as a draft need? Because you've got, the Hellenius that you took last year as a center. Maybe he projects to a winger. I'm not sure. But, if you're looking at their biggest need right now, would you say it's right defenseman? Right shot defenseman?
Yeah. I think it's their biggest need short and long term. Like I said, Adams said they have a good pipeline. I don't think they have a good pipeline. They have some guys. Like, I think Maxime Sturback at Michigan State is a really good option. But even then, it's like you're not slotting him in your top 4 next year. He's still going to school. So I think short and long-term right shot defenseman.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of like Murtka. Again, I don't love the idea of pigeonholing yourself into taking Murtka just because you need a right shot guy. But hey, if he's the best available player on your board at 9, take him.
You've got Dahlin as a left shot defenseman signed until 2032, which, again, barring him wanting out. You've got Power signed until 2031, left shot defenseman. You've got Bowen Byram as a restricted free agent, whether, if he gets a contract or not. And then you've also got Matthias Samuelsson, who has played some right D, but, he's signed until 2030, regardless if you believe that buyout discussion, and Adams really, shot that down today. So you're looking at your right defenseman right now is Connor Clifton and Jacob Bernard-Docker. Obviously, that's not going to get it done if you want to be a playoff team, and he talked about the pipeline of right shot defensemen, and, whether you want to believe him or not, that those guys are ready to go. I would say right defenseman is their biggest need, as you mentioned, like short-term and long-term. So to me, they say they never want to reach for a position of need, but if they're at 9 and they're looking at a defenseman and, guys like Brady Martin, Jake O'Brien are still on the board as centers, do you think that they might go in the direction of just reaching and taking the defenseman, or will they do what they did last year and trade out of the spot? San Jose comes up to take Sam Dickinson, which looking back would have been a nice addition, OHL Defenseman of the Year. And then they took Hellenius at 14. Do you see them doing a small trade like that to trade back to somewhere in the mid round to take that right defenseman instead of reaching on him at that point?
I could see it, but I think if that happens, it would be like last year where it happened like the day, like not the morning, but it happened earlier in the day of the first round.
Right.
I don't think they wait. But at the same time, it's just I always believe in best player available. Don't pigeonhole yourself into taking a right shot defenseman. But if you're sitting there at 9 and you have Reddy Murka as your number 11 overall player, it's not really reaching. Just depends on how high they have the kid ranked.
Right.
He's the premier right shot defenseman of this draft class. I don't think there's really much arguing against that. But no, never pigeonhole yourself into drafting that. Like I said, you need a right shot defenseman. You need one on the roster now. So go fix that, and then you can actually truly draft best player available, because Hellenius is a very good player. I know, his coach in Finland, Olli Jokinen, said he was going to make the Sabres. Obviously, that was never happening. But you can get a player, and he can make an impact sooner than you thought. But you can't bank on that. It's kind of like getting back to their offseason approach. I love Yuri Kulich and I love Zach Benson. You can't pencil them in as your number 1 center and number 1 left winger to play with Tage just because that line was good last year. You can't just pencil them in because they're so young.
You can't rely on that.
Development isn't linear. It's not an indictment on the player, but it's like, what serious playoff team goes into and must make the playoff season with a 20-year-old as their number 1 center? That's not a shot at Yuri Kulich at all. That has to be addressed. So it's just like, make smart moves so you don't have to make dumb decisions with your draft picks.
And the Sabres, obviously, for the last 14 years, have been drafting high. So they have a decent prospect pipeline as far as forwards go. So you'd assume, like, at some point, there's not going to be room for all these guys. You almost forget about Isak Rosean and some of those guys. They moved, Matt Savoy in the trade for Ryan McLeod, which worked out, but he was another top 15 pick for them as well. So, like, at some point, there's not going to be enough room for any of these guys, or not all of them, to come up. So you're going to have to trade them for your needs and roster players. So I'm curious as to how they're thinking about that and whether they want this player to be more impact now, or they're thinking about him being in more impact 2 or 3 years down the road.
You know what really should be happening? Kevyn Adams shouldn't be thinking about the impact of this player at all, because Kevyn Adams should be acting like he won't get a chance to be here when this player is ready, because his job should be on the line. That remains to be seen, though.
So lastly, I guess, as we sort of look at the cap and everything and the roster breakdown, and we talk about pick 9, I think Roger McQueen, just quickly, is sort of an X factor in this draft, because if he didn't have that back injury, he could have been a top 3 or 4 prospect in this in this year's draft. He's got the size, and a force like that, coming out of the Brandon Wheat Kings, is definitely a guy that has a lot of intrigue. Sort of like a boomer bust type of player. But if the Sabres, take him at 9, we'll have to wait and see. I've seen Victor Eklund going to Buffalo as well in some mock drafts. But again, you never know what happens. And if Fortin's right about sort of it being a Misa and Schaefer, and then a drop-off to those guys in the top 6, and then another drop-off, we might end up seeing maybe some teams trade up into this because it is known as a weaker draft as opposed to next year. And picking up, a guy that they just like. You never know. So it's, what do you think we're expecting come Friday and then Saturday? The Sabres have an extra 4th round pick, I believe. Let me try to pull that up. So I guess what would you be expecting or hoping to see coming out of this weekend with, 7 rounds of the draft and possible trades as well?
I would say preferably Bowen Byram is moved by the end of the draft. Preferably they move number 9 for something. I just don't know what. I don't know what impact. Like, you have to package number 9 with something. But the reason I stress like Byram should be moved before the draft is if a team like, let's throw Vancouver out there, right? Vancouver is rumored to be interested in Byram. Why not move him now if you're getting a player and a pick, get the pick for this year. Again, this is how a smart organization would work. Then flip that pick for another asset or package that pick with something else for another. That's why, I think Byram needs to be moved by the time the draft concludes because it gives you a better outline of what you'll need to address come free agency. We know they're not a very active team in free agency, but you probably should be. So I would say Byram is moved, and one other significant move is made, whether that's trading number 9 or trading a guy like Peterka or moving on from a guy like Jack Quinn or even Isaac Rosé. We mentioned him, right? We're approaching either you're an NHL player or you're not. Because if you can't make Buffalo in your 4th year after being drafted, nothing against Rosen. He's a phenomenal AHL player. I think he has a skill set that can play in the NHL. But it's just like, if you don't make it this year, what are you doing? And on the flip side from the Sabres, you shouldn't be having Isaac Rosen on your roster this year because you need to make the playoffs. And having a 23-year-old who's never played in the NHL before in any significant role, you're not a real team. So I preferably 2 significant moves, Byram plus one other move. I don't know what that is. I'm open to anything. And then just, like I said, I want some kind of inkling on how much power Kekkalainen has. And to me, this draft and the moves that they make leading into this draft and coming out of this draft will do that. And I'd rather know that before heading into free agency because it could drastically change everyone's approach to free agency. Like, hey, if Kekkalainen's got power, not that he's going to do this, but like Kekkalainen did get Johnny Gaudreau to come to Columbus. Like, if this dude's got some influence and real power, I know, like, there's no real shot that they're landing a Johnny Gaudreau type free agent, but maybe you could get a tier 2 free agent to come to Buffalo. Like, we're only 4 or 5 years removed from them getting Taylor Hall on a 1-year deal. I'd love to see some savvy like that happen again, but like I said, we'll see.
10 picks they have between Friday and Saturday. You know, they have an extra 4th and 3/3. So, like, would you assume that if they are to make, some of the moves you're hoping, they don't make 10 selections?
No, I don't imagine they make 10 selections. Adams has been known to trade up in the later rounds, right? Like, traded up for Peterka when he drafted Peterka in round 2, traded up for Brody Zemer, and I believe there's a couple like other trade ups he's done later in the draft. So
he also traded their 4th last year where Winnipeg went up and drafted Kevyn He.
Yep. So, like, he does make moves later in the draft, but he didn't trade up another trade last year. He traded the 2nd for Beck Malenstein. So it's like you do have these extra currencies, like, just
right.
This has got to, like, we say this every year, but like this has got to be the year.
We said it last year when they revamped the bottom 6, but like now, like,
but even as dumb as it sounds, like, you do have, if you're keeping everyone except Byram, you still have to sign Bernard Docker, McLeod, Peterka,
Quinn,
even Jack Quinn and Devin Levi. Like, those are guys you have to sign. Like, you got work to do, bud.
He does. And we'll see what the scouting staff does. Again, Friday night, round 1, and then rounds 2 to 7, believe they begin at 12 noon on the Saturday. So, Austin, that's going to be it for us. We're in the offseason right now, and, it's the exciting time of year, but we look forward to coming back full-time in September. But, we'll probably have to come back and talk about, hopefully, Sabres making some significant trades or significant moves come free agency, and maybe they shock us coming out of the draft. But again, with the way Kevyn Adams has been operating, don't want to get our hopes up about that. But it's interesting to come back and talk about this because everybody else has an opinion on it. So
yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I've been overly harsh on Adams, and I just want to stress it. It's not just because of his press conference today. His press conference today wasn't that bad. I'm just, like most of the fan base, I'm just fed up.
Yeah, I mean,
it's above Adams.
Yeah.
As a fan of both the Sabres and the Bills, it's just hilarious to see the stark contrast that Pegula has approaching the Bills versus approaching the Sabres. The Bills, Brandon Beane has the power to spend whatever he wants to get whoever he wants. On the Sabres side, it looks like Adams always says he has the power to, but the actions never match what he says.
See if the actions speak louder than words come this Friday with the 2025 NHL Entry Draft and whether these trade rumors actually come to fruition that we've been hearing over the last month or so. So that's going to wrap it up for a special offseason episode of Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. For Austin Broad, my name is Brandon Caputo. Enjoy the draft. Enjoy free agency. Stay cool out there in this warm weather, and we'll talk to you again very soon. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.